There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from guilt. It's that heavy quiet that follows a mistake you can't take back, a word you wish you hadn't said, an action that echoes long after it's over. Everyone knows that feeling, the moment you realize what you've done can't be undone. And in that moment, a question starts whispering in the back of your mind. Is this the one thing God won't forgive? Most people won't say it out loud. They'll smile, act fine, keep moving, but deep down they carry it, the memory of what they did, who they hurt, or what they became. They go to church, sing the songs, pray the prayers, but somewhere inside, there's a line they believe they crossed. A place too dark for grace to reach. It's strange, isn't it? We talk so much about forgiveness, but we rarely talk about the fear that it might not apply to us. It's easy to believe that God can forgive the liar, the thief, the one who made a mistake in weakness. But what about the one who knew better and still did it? The one who turned away, the one who hurt others intentionally, the one who went too far. There's a reason that question hurts so much, because it touches something sacred. We're not just asking if God forgives sin. We're asking if He can still want us after what we've done. And that's what makes forgiveness such a complicated subject. We imagine it as a transaction, sin given, mercy received. But in truth, forgiveness is not a transaction. It's a pursuit. It's God running towards someone who's running away. And sometimes, the person running isn't a stranger to faith, it's someone who used to walk with Him. When we talk about forgiveness, we can't separate it from the human heart. Because sin doesn't just break rules, it breaks relationship. It distances us not because God withdraws, but because shame does. Shame convinces us that we're beyond repair, that it would be easier to hide than to hope again. That's why so many people live half-free. They believe in grace in theory, but not in practice. They speak about redemption, but keep a mental list of what they think disqualifies them from it. They may not say it out loud, but their silence tells the story. I believe God forgives everyone, except me, but here's something to think about. What if the barrier isn't God's unwillingness to forgive, but our unwillingness to receive it? What if the real prison isn't made of sin, but of self-condemnation? The truth is, forgiveness isn't fragile. It's fierce. It was never meant to be neat or polite. It's raw, relentless, unearned. It meets people in their lowest moments, not their best ones. The very nature of grace is that it's not logical. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit our human sense of justice. That's why it's divine. But we struggle to believe that, because deep down we still want forgiveness to be fair. We want it to make sense, to have limits, something we can measure, something we can compare. Yet the more you understand God, the more you realize His forgiveness isn't fair. It's holy, and holiness looks nothing like fairness. That's where the story begins. Not with condemnation, but with a question that refuses to go away. Is there really forgiveness for everything? Not just for the sins that are easy to confess, not just for the ones others can understand, but for the kind that keeps you awake at night, for the ones you can't explain, the ones you still regret. And maybe the answer is not what we expect. There's a quiet panic that creeps into the soul of someone who believes they've gone too far. It doesn't come all at once. It starts with a question, a whisper. What if this time I broke something that can't be fixed? That thought can follow a person for years. It hides beneath achievements, beneath smiles, beneath prayers that sound confident but are really just desperate attempts to feel clean again. You start wondering, not if God is powerful enough to forgive, but if He wants to. Because that's the real fear, isn't it? The idea that there might be a line, invisible but real, and that somehow, without meaning to, you've crossed it. That maybe grace has limits, and you just happen to test them. This fear doesn't always show up in rebellion. Sometimes it shows up in exhaustion. In people who've tried to make things right 1,000 times, only to fall again. Who pray until the words run out. Who start to wonder if forgiveness has an expiration date. There's something about guilt that makes the soul heavy in a way nothing else does. It doesn't just remind you of what you've done. It convinces you that what you've done defines you. And when that happens, the idea of forgiveness starts to sound unrealistic, maybe even naive. You begin to think, if God knew the real me, He wouldn't want anything to do with me. But that's the irony, He already does. The parts you hide in fear are the exact places He wants to enter. Yet shame builds walls faster than faith can tear them down. Many people carry what I'd call sacred guilt. It's the kind that looks humble on the outside, but is quietly destructive on the inside. It says, I don't deserve grace, as if grace were something anyone could deserve. It turns repentance into punishment and prayer into penance. You stop approaching God as a father and start treating Him like a warden. And the longer you live in that space, the harder it becomes to believe that redemption applies to you. That's when the heart begins to settle into a lie. Not that God can't forgive you, but that He shouldn't. You tell yourself it's humility, but it's really despair dressed as holiness. You punish yourself because part of you believes it's the only way to make things right. Yet the more you punish yourself, the more distant God feels. Not because he's gone, but because shame doesn't let you look him in the eyes. The truth is, the fear of being unforgivable doesn't come from sin. It comes from misunderstanding grace. Grace doesn't look at who you were or what you've done. It looks at who you still are, and who you can become when you finally stop trying to pay a debt that's already been cleared. But to believe that, you have to confront the part of you that still loves control. The part that says, if I can punish myself long enough, maybe I'll earn peace. That's not repentance. That's religion without relationship. True repentance isn't self-hatred. It's surrender. It's admitting that you don't have the power to clean yourself, and you were never meant to. It's only when you stop fighting to deserve forgiveness that you finally start to experience it. Grace doesn't erase consequences, but it restores connection. It doesn't deny what happened, but it rewrites what it means. It takes your failure, the very thing that was supposed to separate you, and turns it into the doorway back to intimacy. That's the paradox of divine forgiveness. The very thing that made you hide becomes the reason you are found. And yet, for many people, this is the hardest truth to accept. Because it's not about believing in God, it's about believing that God could still want you. There's a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when guilt and grace finally meet. It's not dramatic. There's no thunder, no angelic chorus, no overwhelming sense of release. It often happens in the quiet, when you're too tired to argue with yourself anymore. When you stop trying to prove to God that you're sorry and just whisper, I can't do this alone. That's where grace begins its work. Not in strength, not in confidence, but in surrender. Guilt on its own is heavy but honest. It tells you something's wrong. It reminds you that choices have weight. But when guilt stays too long without grace, it transforms into something else. Shame. And shame doesn't just say you did something wrong. It says you are something wrong. That's the shift that breaks people from the inside out. Grace, on the other hand, doesn't deny what happened. It doesn't pretend sin didn't leave a scar. It simply insists that the scar isn't the whole story. Grace speaks into the mess and says, you're still mine. You're still loved. You're still wanted. The tragedy is that many never hear that voice. They confuse the echo of their own regret for God's silence. They think his distance means rejection, when in truth, he's often closer in the silence than he ever was in the noise. You see, forgiveness isn't a transaction, it's a transformation. It's not about crossing your name off a list of wrongs, it's about restoring your heart to life. Because guilt can't heal you, it can only expose what's broken. Grace rebuilds. And sometimes that rebuilding hurts. Because real grace forces you to face what you'd rather forget. It doesn't excuse it or explain it away. It looks at it honestly, and then covers it completely. That's the mystery of divine love. It doesn't just fix what's broken. It embraces what's broken while it's being fixed. When you begin to understand that, everything changes. Prayer stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like a conversation. Worship stops being about worthiness and becomes about gratitude. You stop walking on eggshells around God, as if one wrong word might make him change his mind about you. But here's the challenge. Grace only transforms what you bring into the light. The secrets you protect out of shame will continue to own you. The lies you tell yourself to feel good enough will keep you stuck. Grace can't heal what you refuse to expose. That's why forgiveness isn't passive. It requires courage, not to defend yourself, but to be seen fully. It means standing before God, stripped of excuses, and trusting that his love won't flinch. When guilt meets grace, something remarkable happens. Your story doesn't disappear, but it's rewritten. The same chapters that once brought you pain start to carry wisdom. The same memories that once haunted you become reminders of redemption. That's when you begin to understand what forgiveness really is. Not a second chance to get it right, but a second chance to be real. Because grace doesn't look for perfection, it looks for honesty. And when it finds it, it does what nothing else can. It turns your past into a testimony. There comes a point in the journey of forgiveness when you realize the battle was never really about what you did. It was about who you believed you were because of it. That's where the real war takes place. Not in the external consequences, but in the quiet places of identity, where shame whispers, you've gone too far, you've ruined too much, you're no longer who you were meant to be. That whisper is powerful because it feels familiar. Shame often sounds like your own voice, just twisted slightly enough to sound true. It convinces you that forgiveness might cover the act, but not you. It tells you that you might be tolerated, but never truly restored. But restoration, that's exactly what forgiveness does. It's not a surface repair. It's not painting over cracks. It's God reaching down into the deepest fracture of your being and reminding you that your name, your value, your purpose were never erased. They were simply buried beneath the rubble of guilt and fear. Identity restoration is not instant. It's a slow unveiling. You begin to walk differently, think differently, speak differently. You stop seeing yourself as a mistake waiting to happen and start recognizing that you were never meant to live defined by failure. It's in those moments, often small, sometimes mundane, that restoration begins to take root. Maybe it's the first time you pray without rehearsing your words, or when you stop apologizing every time you ask for help. Maybe it's when you catch yourself laughing again, realizing that joy no longer feels foreign. That's the quiet miracle of restoration. It sneaks up on you. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly feel whole. You just notice one day that the ache isn't as sharp, that the weight you carried doesn't fit you anymore. That hope, something you thought you'd lost, is slowly coming back to life inside you. And through all of it, you begin to understand something essential. Forgiveness was never only about removing guilt. It was about reawakening your original identity, the one that existed before the pain, before the sin, before the world told you who you were. It's like God takes your story, still stained and cracked, and says, I can work with this. I can make this beautiful again. Not by erasing the past, but by transforming its meaning. The parts of you that once symbolized defeat start becoming the proof of redemption. And maybe that's what real strength looks like. Not pretending you were never broken, but standing there, fully aware of every fracture, and saying, I am still chosen. You see, guilt may change how you see yourself, but grace changes who you believe yourself to be. And that belief is everything. It's what determines how you love, how you trust, how you show up in the world again. When identity is restored, the relationship with God changes too. You stop approaching him as a criminal begging for mercy and start coming as a child returning home. There's no need to prove, to perform, to persuade. You just belong. That's the restoration forgiveness brings, not just freedom from the past, but the rediscovery of who you've been all along. Forgiveness doesn't stay contained inside you. Once it starts to heal your heart, it inevitably spills into your relationships, sometimes gently, sometimes like a flood that forces you to confront what you've been avoiding. When God begins to heal your identity, you start to see people differently. The same way you once felt unworthy of mercy, you realize others are walking around with their own invisible chains. Guilt they don't talk about, wounds they disguise as pride, silence that hides regret. Suddenly, forgiveness stops being an abstract virtue and becomes something painfully human. It's not easy to forgive others when you've tasted betrayal, disappointment, or indifference. There's a voice that says they don't deserve it. And sometimes you're right, they don't. But that's the paradox of grace. It was never about who deserves it. It's about who needs it. The truth is, you can't give what you haven't received. If you still carry your own shame like a badge of punishment, you'll measure everyone else by the same standard. You'll forgive conditionally, as long as they apologize, as long as they change, as long as it doesn't hurt again. But once you've experienced what it feels like to be completely forgiven, not excused, not justified, but forgiven, you realize how small revenge looks next to restoration. Forgiving others doesn't always mean reconciling. Some relationships aren't meant to return to what they were. Sometimes forgiveness is the quiet decision to let go of your right to collect the debt. You release the person not because they asked for it, but because you're done living chained to them. And then there are the relationships that do come back to life. Those are rare and holy. They often don't look the same. They're humbler, softer, slower. There's no pretending nothing happened. Instead, there's honesty. You begin to speak with more care, to listen with less defense. Forgiveness doesn't erase the scar. It turns it into a landmark. Here is where grace met two imperfect people. Forgiveness in relationships also exposes pride. Sometimes, the hardest person to forgive isn't the one who hurt you. It's yourself for letting them. You replay the moments when you stayed too long, trusted too quickly, or spoke too harshly. But healing relationships begins when you extend to yourself the same understanding you'd offer someone you love. And something profound happens when you do. You stop needing others to carry your validation. You no longer depend on their recognition to feel seen. You love from freedom, not from fear. That's when grace starts reshaping communities. Families begin to soften. Friendships that once felt impossible to repair begin to breathe again. Even in silence or distance, forgiveness has a ripple effect. It shifts the energy around you. It breaks the cycle of pain trying to reproduce itself. In the end, forgiveness isn't only about making peace with what happened. It's about refusing to let it define how you give and receive love. It's the decision to believe that no matter how fractured a relationship has become, grace can still write the last chapter. And maybe that's where redemption becomes visible, not just in prayers whispered alone, but in the way we choose to stay kind in a world that taught us to close our hearts. There's a moment, often quiet and almost imperceptible, when forgiveness stops being something you try to do and becomes the way you live. You start whispering, what do I do with this freedom now? Living free after forgiveness isn't about pretending the past never happened. It's about no longer being defined by it. The memories remain, but the weight changes. You stop dragging them like anchors and start carrying them like lessons, reminders of where grace met you and refused to leave you as it found you. You begin to notice small shifts. The way you talk to yourself becomes gentler. The prayers that once felt like desperate pleas become conversations. You stop approaching God like a debtor asking for extensions and start approaching like a child who knows they belong at the table. But freedom also tests you. Because the moment you embrace it, life will present new opportunities to return to old prisons. Guilt will whisper, "You haven't changed that much." Shame will remind you, "People still remember what you did." And fear will say, "If you fall again, you'll prove them right." That's when you realize forgiveness wasn't meant to make you perfect. It was meant to make you aware of your weakness, but also of the one who keeps offering new beginnings. Living forgiven means walking with the understanding that falling doesn't cancel grace. Refusing to get up does. You start to redefine strength. It's no longer about appearing flawless or spiritually untouchable. Real strength is knowing how fragile you are and choosing to trust anyway. It's saying, "I failed, but I'm not finished." And as you walk in this new identity, something sacred happens. You stop hiding. You stop performing holiness and start living honestly. You no longer need to impress God or people. You simply need to stay close. The closer you stay, the freer you become. This freedom also changes how you see others. You begin to recognize the same need for mercy in their eyes that once burned in yours. Instead of judging, you start understanding. Instead of pointing fingers, you start extending hands. That's how a forgiven person becomes an agent of forgiveness, not by preaching about grace, but by embodying it. Freedom after forgiveness also brings a new kind of responsibility, the responsibility to live in gratitude. Not the shallow kind that just says thank you in passing, but the kind that transforms how you make choices. Gratitude becomes your discipline. It reminds you daily that what you have is not a reward, but a rescue. And maybe that's the real mystery of forgiveness. It doesn't just restore what was broken, it awakens what was asleep. You begin to see beauty in places you once overlooked. You notice how life feels different when your heart isn't carrying a sentence anymore. You laugh more easily. You pray with more honesty. You love without calculating the risk. And when pain returns, because it always will, you face it differently, not as someone condemned, but as someone covered. In the end, forgiveness isn't just something God does for you. It's something He does through you, transforming your scars into testimonies, your regrets into reminders, and your freedom into an invitation for others to find theirs too.